So up next, we're going to be talking about synths and just, making synths and deciding what kind of synths and where they should go for your song. So right now I have an instance of Anna 2 opened up, and just wait for this to load. And then there's a preset that I found in here that I actually really like for the song that I'm making. So I'm just going to go to the presets. There's a lot of great presets in this, by the way, in terms of like plucks and pads and just pretty much anything. They have a lot of good ones. I'm sure in the near future there will be a lot of great packs out that you'll be able to download and use. And overall, though, it's just a great synth to use. So I'm going to go down to plucks, and there's one pluck called, let's see, where is it? Plucky Signs right here. So I'm just going to open that up. Take a listen to that. Yeah, just a very great, like clean sounding, just sign pluck that they have. Has a little bit of a vibrato, almost like a tremolo effect to it. So yeah, so what I'm gonna do is bring down that release. All right, so I like the way that sounds generally. So first off, I'm going to basically just draw in the MIDI here. So I kind of have this vibe that I'm feeling right now, and it's almost like it's a lot of tension to it, very dark feeling. So it's almost going to alternate between F and F sharp. See. Pitch this down a bit. This is a pretty standard riff in a lot of trap music. I personally like it a lot. I sort of play off of it in a lot of my songs, and I hear it a lot in other people's songs as well. But it all comes down to sort of making your own alterations to it and taking that sort of influence and applying it to what you do. I'm gonna have this last little like octave thing right here that just adds sort of a dynamic to it as opposed to just continuing between those two notes. And it sort of just ties together this sort of ambient feel to the song. It definitely brings the emotion to this and the tension and the kind of feel that it's going to build into whatever section comes next. So you could even add like a little bit of reverb to it, just to kind of add to it. So all right, so I'm going to go to the next section and sort of just start kind of drawing in the next notes. And I almost kind of want a walking down sort of feel to bring more tension to this next section to show that it's building and progressing into the next thing. And I think also like the vocals that will be added to this later along the line in a future tutorial will definitely push the feeling of this as well. But having this as a backing definitely is key for what I'm trying to do. So start with the F note here and just kind of have this start walking down. This is another riff you might hear in a lot of songs, pretty generic, but I kind of like sticking with familiar sounding stuff for the most part when it comes to the verse sections and whatever's in the background, just so people are sort of comfortable with what they're hearing at this section and what's going on in the background. And I kind of let the leads of whatever my song is, whether or not that's the vocals or the drop synths, that's going to kind of push the individuality of the song. So for those of you complaining about how generic this is, I am aware, and I like it, so I do not mind. So I'm just going to duplicate this here up until this part. So, and with that said, I'm going to keep adding to this, just building elements basically, by dropping this. And basically what I mean by building elements here is adding a sort of a variety or variation to things. So the listener doesn't get bored with the elements going on. And basically, so it just adds more. And personally, I like when stuff is just changing. And I think most people do as well. And it's not just the same consistent thing throughout the song. I mean, all due respect to those who do like that like static sort of sound for certain things, because it can be essential for a lot of music writing and like a lot of other dance tracks. But for trap music and this sort of style of trap, I like to mix it up a bit. So at this section, it'll kind of go down. You know what actually might be a better option with this could be switching these around. So when basically it'll just drop down to like a low thing right before the build, because right here is essentially, I mean, this whole section is essentially the build, but right here is where it actually starts really getting intense and building up. So I was thinking maybe just swapping these around. Just gonna shift this one down an octave, and this one, and then I'm gonna delete that little thing right here too. So see, we got this thing going on. So the next section I'm going to go into will play off of this as well. So basically after the drop, and your drop's right here, as you can tell by the shenanigans happening with all the drop synth in the group right there. So what I'm going to do is copy over this first section. Feel that out a bit. And then copy over this half just to keep a variety going, because for example, this section right here is equivalent to this section. So these are both kind of like build up points in the track. So basically what the drums will be doing here is the same as what the second half of that build will be doing. So I'm actually going to switch it up slightly more, just slightly so in a way where the lower octave version of this riff will be playing during that second half of that build, which is right here. So it'll feel familiar. It'll be basically a combination of the first thing, but mixed with like it's like a version 2 essentially. So yeah, so after that, I'm going to EQ this a bit because I feel like there's a lot of frequencies clashing here. So I'm going to, of course, add an EQ8. On a side note here, I really like the EQ8. I don't really find much of a need to use other EQs. Like I personally know a lot of producers that enjoy using, you know, other brands, other sorts of things. But, you know, I find that I can do the most and it's the most efficient just with EQ8. And especially after, you know, learning about oversampling mode, you know, that definitely steps up that whole, like the whole game of using it, you know, because I mean, there are certain circumstances where I will use a different EQ. But 95% of the time, I'll say I use the EQ8 just because it's the most convenient for me, and it takes up the less CPU usage. As you can tell, we're kind of jumping up high. I don't have the craziest machine on the market, so yeah. So basically, just gonna do kind of just like a low cut here at around, you know, maybe not 200, but maybe like a little more. So let's hear that sound, how that sounds here. It's a little bit better. There wasn't much going on in the low end, but you know, just to be safe and courteous. Another thing I'm going to do for the build, or for both of the builds actually, is use a utility to fade things out. I personally don't like fading out using the mixer volume, because I feel like there's a lot of times where like I might potentially want to go back and adjust that. Like I know a lot of producers that I know right now don't like to adjust the mixer levels, but you know, there's certain times where it's kind of just like you might as well, you know. So I think in this case I really just like trying to keep everything within this, but just not touching the mixer volume at all. just until the end, possibly. So I'm just going to automate the volume of this down to 0, so it kind of fades out. And then I like keeping everything very clean and consistent here for the most part. So I'm going to just turn it on there and then open up these automations here, just so I can copy and paste them over to the second one. That way it's like, well, the reason why I have this practice of doing this is a lot of times you'll have a plugin that will overall affect the sound, like might have a sort of analog quality to it and might almost have like a slight white noise quality to it. And what this does, it prevents it from affecting the entire track besides that one instance. So I'll turn on and off just manually. So, well, automatically when it's playing, but in this instance, me just doing it manually. So next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add some more drama, like some more elements to this to bring out some more attitude in the overall song. So one thing I might do, I'm thinking of doing is having kind of like this FM wub. So like using Anna 2, I sort of want to just bring this in. And first I'm going to freeze this though, just to keep everything consistent here. All right, so next I'm going to open up Anna 2. Wait for this to load for a second, and then I'm going to pull up just a simple sine wave. I like a really basic sound design. Basically, that's what I was trying to say earlier in the previous tutorial. Was I really like just simplicity to everything and keeping it nice and simple, because it's easy to remember. It's easy to teach people. You know, it's just all around. Just I feel better. You know, so yeah, just keep this a nice simple sine wave. I'm gonna pull down on this the release on the amp envelope. Then what I'm going to do, so the important part here is to go to the second oscillator, change that as well to a sine, and turn the volume down though. And because basically what we're going to do is feed the sound to the other oscillator, thus FMing it. The timbre basically will, the timbre of one will affect the other. That's FM in essence. So the what's important though, it's key important though, is getting the octaves on this right. And this is kind of going to give you, once we have this complete, the FM sound will almost give you a like a wub, like a deep house type wub that I kind of like using as sort of like a synth effect to create drama and energy to the song. So basically I'm going to do the first oscillator down 1 octave, oscillator 2 up 2 octaves. And you're obviously not going to hear it until we adjust the FM. Oh, I almost forgot to turn on the second oscillator's voices. It's not automatically on. So what that should sound like. So you're getting the timbre of oscillator 2, but keeping the sort of pitch and the sort of low end of oscillator 1. So it's very, creates almost like a screaming, a screech sort of sound. So next, what we're going to do is start to process this sound. Basically, I'm going to add an overdrive to this first. Get more of like a grittiness. See here, overdrive. I want to bring down the tone a bit though, just to like, let's see. I think I should kind of keep this at a static in between here, just so we can hear how this sounds. There we go. Hear those harmonics there. I want to adjust this one down. Let's say like 32. The dynamics will be pushed up all the way. Yeah, so you can kind of hear that deep house feel. Next, I'm going to assign a reverb, just sort of like, I'm not using this as a drop synth sound, which most deep house artists do. I'm using this as an effector almost. It's almost just like a, literally just like a synth, you know, just to add to the first shots of each section. Now it's sounding pretty deep house in my opinion. Bass house, whatever you want to call it. I don't even know. The most politically incorrect producer of all time is me. But hey man, I just do me, so what up? So I'm gonna adjust the decay time. Just bring it down a little bit. Let's see, not that much. Yeah, 1.2-ish seems good. Dry wet 25%. Next, I'm going to add a bit of a ping pong delay to keep adding to that just sort of a longevity of the sound. Of course, whatever delay you use is optional. I like using ping pong delay. It's kind of been the delay I've been using since I started using Ableton Live at the age of 12. So that's kind of what I like using. Man, when I started using Ableton Live, it was Ableton 6. That's what I believe, a while ago. Bring those days back. So I'm just kind of, I move this to quarter notes. I'm gonna move this feedback to 29%, 24% on the dry wet, to not too hot or anything. So let's get a little feel of how this sounds now. Let's get that pan action going on, sort of a wide kind of sound. And then next I'm gonna add a bit of an OTT on there. Not too prominent, because what I found with these sorts of sounds is that if you keep the OTT on max, it kind of just it brings down. Okay, it brings out all the elements you don't want to bring out. So in this case, I'm going to drop this down to about 75%. You know what? Maybe even a little bit less, like maybe like 70. So get a little bit of clickiness, but this will be eliminated once we do the automation in this. So nextly, I'm going to just basically compress it with a simple compressor, just to bring up the volume a bit from to compensate for what the OTT sort of did. And just a side note here, a lot of people preferably choose to put like the delays and reverbs after the OTT, but in this case, because the way I'll be using it, I want to really exaggerate the sound of that echo and that delay and that reverb. So that's the reason why I decided to put the OTT and compressor afterwards. Just gonna hard ratio this to infinity and bring this down to about negative 17 point whatever. And yeah, so let's see how that sounds. It's way louder, way more present. You still get the exaggerated delay in here. Lastly, I'm going to add an EQ. So basically that EQ is just going to cut out all the low end of the sound, because we're not trying to use this as a bass patch. We're trying to use it as the drama. So I'm just going to bring up the Q there. Wanted to bring out a bit more of those mids. That's why I kind of brought this up here. All right, so next, what we're going to do is at the beginning of each section, besides the drop, so all the verse and build sections, I'm going to add like just a wub, and I'm going to do it with manual automation on the FM filter, so for the FM macro. Find our note, which will probably be F1, so in the key of F. A little bit of dissonance with this sort of sound, but it's kind of a nice, flavorful dissonance. So open up Anna 2 again, just to get that FM macro going. Bring this guy down a little bit. What we want to do here is I'm going to zoom in, basically just make a wub. Can't hear that at all. Very slow, but you can kind of feel the sound of it. FM synthesis, when I learned about it, it definitely changed the entire world of my production. It was like a couple of years ago, and I was in this like master class out here in LA where I live, and I believe it was Getter who really explained it thoroughly, and I really understood it after he sort of explained it, because I personally like learning things with a lot of layman's terms and simplified and not so technical. So it was really cool how I learned about that. Basically, the whole thing that I explained earlier about the timbre and running one to the other, and that's kind of what it is. And you can get a lot of crazy sounds out of that. So we want to make this a lot quicker. So I'm gonna go and change the attack of this little automation here. I'm actually gonna curve this down a little bit. When you can curve by hitting Option, and when you hit Option, and the automation line will light up blue, and it will have that little curve next to the mouse. That's when you can curve these, and it can come in handy if you want to get certain effects out of the automation. I want this to be shorter overall, so maybe the in-between. There's still a bit of that clickiness going on, so what I'm going to do is go back in and adjust the attack on the sound. So let's see here. Still a little bit. There we go. Again, I'm going to go back in, keep finessing this here. Bring this in closer. That's the sound I want right there. It's a nice short little FM wub going on. So I'm just going to duplicate this. I'm going to listen. See, it sounds hypey. Basically acting similarly to how we had the brass acting. And in this case, where that reverse brass is coming in, this will supplement for the actual brass hit these sections, but kind of leave the listener kind of surprised in a way. So